All right, so in this episode, we're going to go ahead and set up how to get ourselves to create an actual lobby, spawn our player, and also have that lobby show up in the lobby list as well. So not actually synchronizing anything, we're just merely getting the game to interact with Steam and properly host a server that can be seen by other clients. Let's get into it. So starting off in the project, we already have something that I kind of want to change from the direction I originally went. These buttons that are here in the actual room are based off of this template button, and I just simply modified them to do different things in the actual code of the button itself. I was wanting to go a certain direction, but I don't want to go that direction anymore. We're going to make these their own individual objects. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just duplicate this button twice. But this is going to be the host lobby button. And the second duplicate is going to be obj button join lobby button. I want to contain all the logic for hosting a lobby within this button so that you can piece it out and chunk it how you want to in your own personal projects. And the same thing with join lobby. I want to make sure that all the sections of code that we're doing is kind of in its own chunk. That way you can pick it apart later if you need to in the future. So all this logic that we put here under the select action, we're going to kind of cut all of this, and we're going to delete that. We don't need this. We don't need that. And we don't need this. That was the join lobby button. So let us double click this guy, and we're going to modify this one. Now we're going to set its parent object to UI button, what it was before. And we're going to have it still inherit those actions, but instead, I got to delete it and then inherit it. There we go. Okay, so we're going to let it inherit all of its default stuff, but we're going to define that select action and have it still be a function and paste what we cut earlier. There we go. So that functionality I still want to exist, but instead it's going to be its own actual button instead of going through the other stuff. Go ahead and delete the other two things here since we're inheriting it as a parent now. And then we'll change what we need to. So that was for the join lobby button. Let us go back, double click this host lobby button, cut the creation code, just cut it, delete the actual button itself, and this host lobby button that we created, double click it, delete everything in here. Oh yeah, just delete everything in here. Set the parent to object UI obj button, and right click inherit event. Right click on the create section, inherit event, and paste what we had. Select action equals function. Paste what we have. Okay, cool. So just getting that out of the way. All right, this will set up here. This will be a bit better moving forward. We're actually not going to use any of this for right now. We're going to simplify this a bit. I'm not going to delete it right now because we're going to use it later. But we're going to change the lobby list thing here in a minute. But that is all we need to change for this join lobby button. And for the host lobby button, we're going to add two things here. Because this button, whenever we click on it, we do want it to create the server object. And we want it to, instead of going to the room immediately, we want to send a query. We want to request Steam to create a lobby for us, right? We click the host lobby button, boom, we want it to create a lobby at that point in time. So command to do that is Steam lobby create, and the type of lobby we want to create is a Steam lobby type public, and the amount of players we want to put into that lobby, we'll just say 4 max for right now. And at this point, this button is almost ready. However, when we click the Steam lobby create button, Steam is sending out a query to create a lobby, and it will wait for a response. We'll get a response where Steam tells us, hey, this is your lobby ID that was created. And we can then go ahead and join that lobby. that logic, we don't want it to always be going on in the game, like waiting for a lobby to be created. We really want it to only exist while we are in this menu here. And so we're going to put that asynchronous call, that listen, in this new event that is added due to us having that Steamworks plugin. And we're going to do async Steam. So whenever a Steam action is inserted. And we're going to say this is our listening for lobby creation. That is the purpose of this section of code, this event. And we're going to have a switch statement based on an asynchronous event. And the way it pulls it in is that it looks for an event type. And so when an asynchronous event is triggered, it will load all the data from that event, and it's looking specifically for the event type, and then we're going to perform certain actions based on what event occurred. And so for our first case, we're going to look for lobby created. And when this lobby is created, we want it to first tell us, show debug, hey, lobby was created. And we'll also have it, just for debug reasonings, we're going to put the Steam lobby get lobby ID. And that will tell us what the lobby ID is. Not terribly necessary, but it's good to know. Just try it out. ID, and we're going to have it join that same Steam lobby get lobby ID. And what this is going to do is it's going to issue another request to join the lobby. So we create a lobby, Steam responds back, hey, lobby was created, here's the lobby ID, great. Let's go ahead and join that same lobby that was created with Steam lobby join ID and that. And so now that's going to send another request to Steam and another response back to us, which is a lobby joined message. So we create a second case here called lobby joined. And the code for that will be a little unique. We're going to say if Steam lobby is owner, so that if we are the Steam lobby owner, we're going to have it do the following. We're going to first set some data. Now I'm pretty sure this was in the demo thing, and I'm pretty sure this is how our session of GameMaker, like our game, knows to show this type of lobby in the client. Because when we're searching for lobbies with this is GameMaker test. So we'll go over that a bit more whenever we go over live presence, or rich presence rather. This will probably help us a bit more when we understand this information. But for now, just kind of trust that it works. And we're also going to make the creator of this lobby be us. Get persona name. That way, whenever we are, did I type that in right? Oh, I didn't put a comma. Sorry. So what this does, for every lobby that exists on Steam, you can actually put data there. Like we could even have something that says like Steam lobby set data, and we'll say like the data is map, like map entry. And we could say, all right, well, the current map is actually called game room or something like that. And so whenever we call this, oh, I put a capital D. Whenever we call this and we wanted to pull that information, we can get lobby data, which is simply just like this. And if we ask to get lobby data from map, it'll give us what game room was, whatever value is set here. So if you can kind of imagine like a small dictionary that exists in the Steam lobby that you can store a certain amount of data in. Not a bunch, but some. So it's usually useful for like whatever state the game's in. Like maybe you're currently in a dungeon, or you're currently in a particular level, or you have the score is this, or the number of players, or something like that. You know, this is basic information you could store here. So not a bunch, but a little bit. And once we have set that data, we want to then go to our game room, which is just a level that we have here set. Now, once the lobby is joined, this is all occurring, and that is technically the end of what this button is being used for. Because remember, this button will only exist in the main menu. And so that's all that. This is pretty much all the logic we need for these two things. So let's go ahead and put these two objects, join. This is the join lobby button. Let's shrink it, put it up here, and the host lobby button. Okay. So now we press the play button. Oh, we also didn't say that. So there's a few more things we had to change. We'll get that in a second. But if we press the join button, this lobby will spawn. It's not modified, but that's fine. Press the host lobby button. It pulls us to the right room. Now, the button, the join button lobby, the join lobby button, we're gonna just take this variable here and make it say join. And we're all good here. Cool. We're gonna use this a little bit later, but for now, these two buttons are in a state where they are good to go. So let's go ahead and close that stuff. Next object we're going to touch is this lobby list. Now this is just some basic setup. Some of this is more just cosmetic setup, which is this information. And under variable definitions, we're going to have two of them, one being X scale and one being Y scale. Do 25 and 16. Make those integers. And once again, this is just because of how I wanted it to look. It'll work out for us. And just put these two things there. Now, whenever we spawn this object, we're wanting to tell Steam, hey, search for lobbies with a specific criteria, right? And so we're first going to call that once. And then instead of having like a refresh lobby button, we're just going to tell this object like every 5 seconds or so, run the refresh the lobby list again, like try to actively give us a live appearance of Steam lobbies, live presence of Steam lobbies. So the way it requests that information, we're going to do the first request here is Steam lobby list add string filter. This is where we're using that data that we set previously in that host lobby button, where whenever we hosted a lobby, we set data is maker game test to true. And so when we add when we're searching for a lobby, before we search for lobbies, we can add a filter to it. And we're looking for is game maker test is the key value it's looking for, and it's looking for the value of true. And the type of filter we're using is a Steam lobby list filter EQ. So if it equals this, then show us that server, right? And so with that, if we then just simply make the request, Steam lobby list request. That is the actual query to pull for, to make the Steam request to ask for lobbies. Create a asynchronous call so that whenever that request comes back and we get the response, we want to know what to do with it. So we're going to say this description is just listen for server list query. Response, rather. That's the description of this step. And once again, it's another switch case, and it's switching on a async load with, it's looking for the event type variable, or like entry, rather. And on that entry, we want to have just one case. And the response we're looking for is lobby list. Once we get that response, we are going to do some cosmetic logic as far as just creating a list from it. The big thing is that there are two functions that are kind of important here. And I'm just going to write them out. It's looking for a Steam lobby list get count. So this will tell us how many lobbies match that query. And then we're going to loop through that And we're actually going to, against, because this is going to be like a number like 1 through 10 or 1 through 20 or whatever, for how many lobbies actually exist. I haven't done anything more than 4, so but I'm sure it worked just fine. And pretty much you iterate against that number, and you do Steam lobby list get lobby ID, and you base that off of, like, you know, the index number that you give it. So let's kind of walk through how we want to think this function through. So whenever we receive a new lobby list, we obviously want to somehow reset the lobby list, right? So we'll come up with some logic to do that. But before we do that, let's go ahead and kind of go through the logic of receiving a lobby count. So if we receive 0 lobbies back, right, there's no lobbies that get created. So if Steam lobby list get count is equal to 0, we want it to you know, show us that there's no lobbies. We could have it be a log message that appears down here, but we're going to have it be an empty server button, just kind of the way I've done it with this lobby item that I created. So we're going to do that is we're going to make use of the array that I have that already exists on this lobby list object, which is this lobby list. We're going to rename that to this lobby list. We're going to remove that underscore. It's just a lobby list array. It's empty as of right now. I think it has this one blank item, and you'll notice that when you play the game, it says searching. It's just a blank button that has no lobby ID attached to it. Essentially, we're going to just recreate the same object, and we're going to put it right here. But we want this to equal, you know, the same line of code, actually, because it needs to be inside of that lobby list so that we can delete it later. So we're going to get this inside this line. We're just going to copy that same line of code. So it's adding back to this array list of lobbies, and it's just making that button appear, that object there. So it's a reference to that. But if we actually do have more than one lobby, one or more lobbies that appear, we want to do the following. So we need to iterate through that full count of lobbies so that we can have, you know, the ability to join whatever lobby that shows up in this filter, whatever lobby that shows up for our game. So we got to do a var loop. And as we iterate through this lobby count, we want to create like a button to join that lobby, right? So we're just going to make an instance create depth magic number shenanigans I'm doing here because I want it to look a certain way. And depth of 20, we're creating the object lobby item, but we want to pass some variables into this actual lobby item, right? Oh, need a comma right there. For every lobby item, we're going to give it a lobby index first off. So this is the first lobby that appears, right? We also need to give it its own lobby ID. So we have Steam lobby list get lobby ID based off of its own index. And we also want to, you know, tell us who the creator of this lobby is. And the button will also do this. So Steam lobby list get data. Remember we had that data that we determined earlier where we set the creator of it, and it's going to be my persona name, which is like my Steam name. And we're going to get that data. So get first, it's from the first lobby, and get this data from that first lobby. Because this takes kind of like, it needs to know what specific lobby that we got from this whole request, right? From this whole asynchronous response. So lobby number 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, and the creator of said lobby as well. So that is all we need in that regard. And once we have that instance, we want to make sure to put that into our lobby list. So, or sorry, we need an array push that into our lobby list. That instance that we create. So that's really it. So now we need to have some kind of logic to reset the lobby list prior to creating this whole list, right? Because if we have this whole list and we get the response again, we want to make sure we clean up before we create all these objects once again. And it's kind of a long bit we're going to create it over here just so this function exists, and I'm just going to copy paste it. Essentially, we're just going to iterate through the entire length of the lobby list. We can say, I have a little debug message saying we're deleting this old lobby, and we're just doing instance destroy against it and making the lobby list an empty array again. So we're just putting us back in a blank slate of it being an empty lobby list before we populate it up again. So now that we have this function, we're going to copy it and put it here and call it. This is a clean way of just doing it all in one step instead of putting all of this here. So as of right now, our game is actually in a state where we can back, and we didn't close the lobby, so technically it still exists because it's here. I just restarted the game, which didn't really close or delete the lobby that was created. We didn't tell Steam to do that. So it's still there and existing, and we're not cleaning it up properly. Now, I don't have any logic here on this button to join the lobby. As far as UA is concerned, we're kind of finished here. We've done our lobby lists, how it looks. We've also taken care of our host lobby button and our join lobby button. But what we need to do now, let's go ahead and close all our windows. We need to start interacting with these two objects. If you saw in we actually create this global variable. We're creating a server object, and we're just putting a reference to it globally in case we ever need to reference back to it in the game. But technically, there's only ever going to be one object of server that's created. And we want this to always exist because this server object will only exist for the person who is hosting the lobby. Everyone else who's connecting will be using a client object. This server object will not exist on their instances of the game. We only want one instance of this to ever exist for a point of truth, for a source of truth for the server to it. For any random things that occur, the server needs to want to depict that, not the client. For anything that's spawned that's going to exist permanently in the game, we want the server to do that, not the client. And so this is kind of like a little bit of authority that we're issuing with the host. Then we're not giving that authority to the client because maybe certain logic will only have existing here on the server object. Like, for example, the ability to spawn a new player that joins in. That should be something emitted from the server object, not a client that joins in. So the logic we're going to do now is based off of if this already exists. So we told it to create the server object first, which at this point, when you click this button, the server object will immediately exist, and then the game is waiting to get a response back from Steam saying, hey, your lobby was created. And once it's created, we want it to, well, we saw it here. Once it's created, it does the Steam lobby join. And then once you join, it sets you as the owner, or if you're the owner, I'm sorry, it sets this data against the lobby, and then it pushes us to the next game room. Now that the server object already exists, this will be what will determine whether or not to spawn something, to spawn a player. Because if we were to press play now, you notice that when we click host lobby, there's a little hang there. It sends the request and it receives a response of a lobby that was being created, and then it sends us to this game room. But we're not actually spawning in here at all because the server object hasn't told us to spawn our player. So all of that logic, as far as spawning the player, moving game rooms, this logic will continue on from this server object at this point for the host. We're going to do two main things here. We're first going to create a few starting variables. So we're going to make this just initiate server variables. Like, for example, a player list. We need an array that can be filled in with players as they join it. We need to also have the server Steam ID, and we'll just have that get user Steam ID. And this will be mostly used for when we're spawning in players. We want to make sure that the player object that is being spawned has a Steam ID that matches the client or the server Steam ID, so that you know who has authority to control this particular player object, this pawn, as Unreal coins it as well. And then for sake of ease, we want also have the Steam name. Steam get persona name. And we're going to use a character variable to kind of, if we ever need to reference the character of the server, like whatever character the server is inheriting, whatever character the server is controlling, we're putting a reference there just in case we ever need it. And we also want to add ourselves to the player list. We're the first player, so player list 0, the very first entry to this array. It's going to be kind of a dictionary. We're going to have it have values of Steam ID. Why is it there? Sorry. And that'll be our Steam ID. We also want it to have Steam name, and that will be our Steam name. We also want it to have character, which is undefined for right now. We haven't spawned in yet. This is just the server object being created. And we also want kind of a start position. This is useful for whenever we are syncing player states to new players that are joining in, or when we're allowing them to join, what their start position is going to be whenever they join in. This is useful. There might be other ways to do this, but this is just kind of how I've done it. We're going to make a function called grab spawn point. And we'll tell it to grab the first spawn point because that's who this first player is. Now this function doesn't exist. Let's go ahead and create that really quick. If you've noticed, in the actual game room, we have these blue squares. These are just spawn points that I created here. It's literally just a, where is it? Oh, it's right here. It's literally just an object called spawn point. There's nothing fancy about it. It's using a sprite. But we're going to reference it with a function that we are going to call. We're going to make a new script here called player management. And in this player management script, we're going to create a function called grab point, and we'll just have it get the player number, or it'll take an argument for the player number. Remember how we said grab player for player number 0, do this. And so we want a spawn point. We're searching for one, so do instance find obj spawn point and player. So it's looking for whatever instance so if we send number 0 here, it's looking for the first instance of this. We put 1, looking for the second one, 2, third one. And when it finds it, or if it finds it rather, equals no one. So if it doesn't find it, we're just going to return the point of 0 with y equals 0, just like the origin of the method, whatever, that's fine. But if it does find it, we want it to go ahead and return the x value of that object and the y value. So this function will now return an object that we can then reference the x or the y value of it, which will be really easy. But now we also need to have a room start call. So when the room starts up, we want to spawn all the players, right? Because the server needs to be the one to determine where every player is going to spawn. The player should not determine that. The server, the host, should be the one that determines this kind of logic. And so when we spawn an object, we want it to spawn here in this instances layer. We're being very simple with all these rooms, so it only has the instances layer. So we're going to first just get that player layer. So player and now we need to iterate over the player list to spawn each player as they exist in the player list. So for var player equals 0 through the array length of player list, and then iterate over every player. And with this being the case, we'll just go ahead and say the position be equal to position that we're going to spawn them at. It's just going to grab a spawn point. This function that we created earlier. player 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You get it there. And we're also going to create the instance that we're actually going to spawn that player. And it's going to, we're making it equal to instance so that we have a reference that we can then set each player in the player list equal to something else, right? We're then going to set the instance of the player that we're spawning back to that dictionary. Because remember how when we created our first player here, ourselves, we have Steam ID, Steam name, character. The character was undefined initially, but now that we're actually spawning him, we can put a reference to that player. So that will be instance create on the layer, because we know what layer we're wanting them to be spawned at, against the position X and position Y, because we got that from that grab spawn point function. And on the player layer that we got earlier, and we're wanting to spawn the object of player. This is the object that contains all the logic for movement, shooting something, or whatever. It's your player object, your player character. But we're wanting to pass some information to that. So we have the Steam name that we want to define, right? And that's going to be the player. It should already exist though, because it's already in this player list dictionary object that we have going on. And we also want the Steam ID. Player list. Player ID. We also want to know what lobby member ID this player is, because we're going to do a little cosmetic differentiation between each player so that we can identify each player just based on color. And this will just be simply their index based on the player list dictionary. And that's pretty much all the information we need here. So let's go ahead and close that up. Now, this doesn't exist right now because initially I didn't make that decision till later in my recordings. So if you would go to the object player and add a variable, it's called lobby member ID, just make it equal to 0 for now. And under variable definitions, add that as another thing to lobby member ID and make that an integer. This will be useful for identifying, are you player number 1, 2, 3, whoever was actually joined into the lobby. Back to the server object. That should clear up. There it goes. All right, cool. So we've created the player. We spawned them in as the host. So now we need to actually add them or update our array here of players with this information we just created. So player list player, the new character is now equal to this instance that we just created. Also, their spawn point. Oops. This is the new start position they had. And we can use that like if they die, they can spawn there again, right? In my game, there's no dying, but you get the gist. And if the player equals to us, so Steam ID equals our own Steam ID, we want to then set our own character equal to this instance as well. That's just saying that as we're going through this, array of players, right? If the player Steam ID equals our Steam ID that we have here, then just make our character equal this instance that we just spawned as well. Sure, we could say, if the index is 0, make it us, because technically we did set us to 0. We should always be 0. The first one in this list. It's fine. It works. At this point, our server object is finished. Now, there is something else we need to update with the player object. And I had you add this lobby member ID section, but I forgot to also have you change local Steam ID. This will be useful for when this object is created. It will set the local Steam ID equal to whatever, we want it equal to whatever local instance of the game is running. So we want to actually use a query called steam get user Steam ID. This will get whoever's playing the game, it will get their Steam ID, the local instance. That way we can know that if the local Steam ID on this object is equal to the Steam ID that was assigned to it when it was created, as it is one of the variable definitions we have down here, it will allow you to control the character. The reason why that works is because in this step logic that I included on the player object, my get controls has a variable I put on a Boolean variable. And this is what determines all of the, right key input, left key input, stuff like that. And if you're a local person, if you're the local player of this player object, of this character, this champion or hero or whoever you're playing, it will allow your keyboard or your gamepad inputs or your mouse inputs or whatever to actually affect the character. Otherwise, it will just simply not do anything. You can't control them. So now at this point, if we were to press the play button and we host our lobby, we can then see the character is spawned. And since that character's Steam ID matches the Steam ID of my instance of the game, I'm allowed to control them. I can fire the button or whatever, and I can do all sorts of stuff. So this is my character. If another person were to join, they would not be able to control this character because their Steam ID wouldn't match the Steam ID assigned to this player object. So about now, I think we're in a good
That's the kind of
direction
episode.
We're going to be going. We're going to be validating input based on
join the
whose
lobby
Steam
with
ID
the
is
player.
doing what, and control it because our Steam ID matches the Steam ID that was created with this object. And our lobby also shows up in a lobby list. So next episode, we're going to go ahead and work on spawning other people and being able to actually join the lobby as a client. So see you then. Don't forget to also push any changes you just made to your own project. Let's say completed episode 2, commit to main, that, and push it. That way, in the next episode, when you're pulling this, your repo, your version, your forked version of this repo to that other VM that you have, we'll be able to synchronize the code between the two very easily and be able to, have a similar matching client on both sides, matching, GameMaker game instance on both your computer and the VM that you have running.